The death of Moses. The sun had risen over the wilderness, casting its light upon the vast encampment of Israel. For 40 years they had wandered, guided by clouds by day and fire by night, sustained by manna and water from the rocks, disciplined by laws carved in stone. Now, at last, the promised land stretched before them, its hills visible across the Jordan River. Yet the man who had led them so long stood apart, gazing silently at the land he would not enter. His name was Moses, servant of the Lord, prophet unlike any other, friend of God. The years weighed heavily on his frame, but his eyes remained sharp and his mind clear. He remembered the day when God had called him from the burning bush, a reluctant shepherd trembling before the task of confronting Pharaoh. He remembered the mighty plagues, the night of the Passover, the waters of the Red Sea dividing before their eyes. He remembered the thunder on Mount Sinai and the voice that spoke commandments of eternal weight. He remembered rebellion and mercy, judgment and renewal. Through all, God had been faithful. Now Moses stood on the threshold of the promise, yet forbidden to step inside. His heart carried no bitterness, only sorrow mingled with peace. The Lord had spoken to him clearly. He would die in the land of Moab, and Joshua would lead the people into Canaan. Moses had struck the rock in anger, failing to honor the Lord before the assembly, and for this reason he was not permitted to cross the Jordan. Still, the grace of God surrounded him, for he would see the land with his own eyes, and his rest would be glorious. Moses called the tribes together. From the youngest child to the eldest elder, the people gathered to hear his final words. His voice carried the weight of years, yet his passion burned like fire. He recounted the journey, reminding them of the covenant, urging them never to turn aside to idols. He spoke blessings over each tribe, words of prophecy that would echo across generations. To Reuben he spoke of life preserved. To Judah he prayed for strength and leadership. To Levi he declared honor for their priestly calling. To Joseph he poured forth blessings of abundance, of land and fruitfulness. To Benjamin he promised the shelter of the Lord's presence. Each tribe received its portion, and the people listened with reverence, knowing these were the last words of their shepherd. After blessing them, Moses lifted his staff one final time. His eyes swept across the assembly, and he saw in them the future of the nation. He saw farmers and warriors, priests and prophets, kings and children yet unborn. He saw triumphs and failures, exile and return. His heart longed for their obedience, for he knew their destiny was bound to their faithfulness. When the gathering ended, Moses turned toward Mount Nebo. The mountain rose from the plains of Moab, its peak called Pisgah, overlooking the land of Canaan. With steady steps he climbed, accompanied by no one but the presence of God. His body may have been old, but strength carried him upward, for this was the journey appointed to him before the foundation of the world. From the summit, the view spread wide and beautiful. To the west lay the Jordan Valley, green and fertile. Beyond it, the city of Jericho shimmered like a jewel. Farther still stretched the hills and plains of Canaan, the inheritance of Israel. Moses' eyes traced the horizon, seeing the land of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, the hills of Judah reaching toward the sea, and even the distant Negev. Though his feet would never touch the soil, his heart embraced it fully. The Lord stood beside him, invisible yet near, and spoke with gentleness. "This is the land I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." The words were not harsh, but filled with finality. Moses accepted them without protest, for he trusted the wisdom of God. In that sacred moment, memories flooded his mind. He saw the faces of Aaron and Miriam, now gone before him. He remembered the countless times he had fallen on his face in intercession for the people. He remembered the shining glory when he had come down from the mountain, and the terror in the eyes of those who could not bear the radiance. He remembered his own failings, the burden of leadership, the loneliness of being set apart. Above all, he remembered the presence of the Lord. The one who had been with him as a friend speaks with a friend. There on Mount Nebo, Moses laid down his staff. He lifted his hands one final time in prayer, not for himself, but for the people he loved. He asked the Lord to bless them, to guard them, to guide them into the land with courage and faith. He prayed for Joshua, that the Spirit would strengthen him as leader. His words were whispered into the wind, carried into eternity by the one who hears all prayers. Then the moment came. Moses lay down upon the mountain, his eyes closing as the vision of the promised land lingered in his mind. The Lord himself received his spirit, and the servant of God rested. There was no pain, no struggle, only peace and the embrace of the eternal. The scripture declares that the Lord buried him in a valley in Moab, opposite Beth Peor. No man knew the place of his burial, and no man ever would. His tomb was hidden, for the Lord had claimed his servant for himself. His body was not to be a shrine of idolatry, but his legacy was to be remembered in the lives of those who followed the covenant. When the people learned of Moses' death, a great mourning arose. For 30 days they wept in the plains of Moab, their cries echoing across the wilderness. They remembered his leadership, his courage, his prayers, and his patience. They remembered the miracles wrought through his hands and the words of law delivered through his lips. They wept not only for a leader, but for a father who had carried them through the desert. Yet in their sorrow, hope remained. For Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands upon him. The people obeyed Joshua, recognizing that the mantle had passed. The journey would continue, and the promise would be fulfilled, for the Lord was with them as he had been with Moses. The memory of Moses did not fade. In generations to come, his name was spoken with reverence. Prophets would point back to his example, priests would follow the laws he delivered, and kings would be measured against the standard of his obedience. Even when Israel strayed, the words of Moses called them back to covenant faithfulness. Centuries later, on a mountain in Galilee, Moses appeared again, standing beside Elijah, speaking with Jesus in glory. Though his body had been buried in Moab, his spirit lived in the presence of God, bearing witness to the one who would fulfill the law and the prophets. His death was not an end, but a doorway into greater life. The story of Moses' death remains one of the most profound in all of Scripture. It teaches that no human leader, no matter how great, can complete the journey alone. The purposes of God transcend individuals, and his plan unfolds from generation to generation. It teaches that obedience matters, for even the greatest prophet was disciplined for his disobedience. Yet it also teaches that God's grace abounds, for he allowed Moses to see the promise, to finish his course with honor, and to rest in peace. The death of Moses was a moment of sorrow, but it was also a moment of transition. The baton passed to Joshua, and the people moved forward into destiny. The God who had led them out of Egypt was the same God who would plant them in the land, flowing with milk and honey. Moses' voice still echoed in their ears, "Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." Thus ended the earthly life of Moses, the servant of the Lord. No prophet like him arose in Israel again, one whom the Lord knew face to face in all the signs and wonders, in all the mighty power and great deeds. His memory endured, not in a monument of stone, but in the living faith of a people called by God's name. His story continues to inspire, reminding all who read it that the greatest honor is not in crossing into earthly lands of promise, but in being faithful to the end, so that the Lord himself may say, "Well done, good and faithful servant."